Everybody wide awake? Ready for action? Alert, sitting up straight. This is important when we study, actually, right? This is the tradition. You go to these yoga studios in the West, and like the students are like, you've seen this before? Maybe some of you have done it. That's not the tradition. The tradition is sit up straight. And it's helpful. Your mind becomes more clear, it becomes more lucid. That's why we do all this asana, so you can sit up straight when you meditate and when you learn. All right. Please follow along if you wish. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitang Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, let's get right into it. We've been using certain nature analogies to examine the nature of the self. We defined yoga. Maybe I'll even see if I can pull that up. I'm gonna have to get used to using this, so please bear with me as I trying to find the most efficient way to bring slides up here without disturbing the flow of the class. And I feel like I'm failing horribly at it right off the bat. So let me see. There's a mustir. If you want to know what the mustir looks like, there's one right there. This is the sage Vidur meeting the sage Maitreya down in Haridwar, asking him the question, if we're both blissful and changeless by nature, then how do we experience misfortune and misery? And he gave that example of the moon, right? As the moon reflected on water appears to the seer to tremble due to being associated with the quality of the water, so the self associated with matter appears to be qualified as matter. But that misconception of self-identity can be diminished gradually by the grace of Sri Krishna through the process of bhakti yoga in the mode of detachment. Okay, here we go. Yoga is a practice. Let's pull this one up. This is our fundamental premise for this entire course, that yoga is a practice which empowers one to overcome the obstacle of the mind for the purpose of the self experiencing its own true nature. And we're going through this step by step, first examining the nature of the self, then we'll examine the mind and how the mind works, and then we'll look at the different practices, 4 practices: Ashtanga Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. And then we'll go deeper and deeper and deeper into that last practice at Bhakti Yoga. That's what we'll be doing through this course. Sound okay?
Yes.
So we're still working on the nature of the self. And we established that we're not the body, we're not the mind, we're something divine. And we spoke yesterday a lot about this right here, Purusha and Prakriti. A very helpful model for us to use. It's simple, but it's saying something very simple, but very profound. Something that a lot of the greatest scientific minds of our time have trouble accommodating. They're very insistent on the idea that consciousness, life and consciousness, is a material phenomenon, that there's no other ingredient out there. There's no element out there that we can't see or touch that's responsible for consciousness. If you blend the material elements in the right way, in the right combination, then consciousness arises. And they claim that that has happened over the course of centuries. Now, the yogis, as I mentioned earlier, you could go back 10,000 years ago up into these mountains and ask them about this. They'll say, no, no, no. Consciousness is a symptom of the spiritual energy. You can't create consciousness out of the material energy. It's a symptom of spirit. And if you come back and go to those mountains 10,000 years from today, you're going to find the yogis saying the same thing. And you will also find that the scientists will not have yet created consciousness in their laboratories, right? At least this is what the yogis are saying. It's where I definitely invest my faith. And the material scientists, although they don't like to admit this, they're investing their faith the other way, right? They'll say, no, no, it's not a question of faith. It's a question of evidence. But the fact is, there's no evidence that proves that spirit doesn't exist. As a matter of fact, there's a ton of evidence that it does. It's just a question of how you weigh that evidence and then where you choose to invest your faith, okay? But the more that we hear about this, the more that it becomes very reasonable. There's a joke that's sometimes told. Would you like to hear a joke? Okay. It says that there's a man, I don't know if it's very funny. We'll get to the punchline, you can see, but it illustrates something. There's a man, he arrives home, he drives his car home. It's nighttime. And he pulls into his driveway, and he sees that across the street that his neighbor is down on the ground, crawling around looking for something. And so he walks over to him and says, oh, you lost something? Can I help you? He says, yeah, I lost my keys. He said, oh, you lost your keys over here? He said, no, I lost them over there. Well, then why are you looking over here? Because the light is better here. Right? He's under the lamppost, right? So the idea is that this assumption that what I'm looking for must lie within the boundaries of where I'm best accommodated to perceive something is a fallacy, right? But the scientists are insisting that consciousness and its origin must lie within the parameters of what they can study with their instruments, what they can see through their microscopes, you see? But why should they assume that? What's the basis for assuming that? It's just their faith that that's the case. But the evidence doesn't warrant that faith. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so the yogis say, no, no, no. Consciousness, life, is a separate ingredient. And these two energies are what make up this world that we live in. The spiritual energy, the material energy. It's the spirit entering into the material energy that animates it, that makes the body, which is actually dead matter, that makes the body appear to come to life, right? And in the moment that soul, that element of spirit, that other energy, the moment that it leaves the body, it becomes very clear that there's no life in it. And then that spark moves on. Now that's where we place our faith, right? That's where we place our faith. And we could go into different reasons why we accept that. We heard one verse from the Bhagavad Gita that's saying, hey, you're in essentially a different body right now than you were in 30 years ago. But you remember that body. Doesn't that tell us something? Doesn't that tell us that we don't change in the body, even though the body changes? That we're sitting in a chemically different body than we were in previously? But we remember being in that chemically different body. This means I've been in more than one body in one lifetime, so that my consciousness is not dependent on any particular body, but is something separate from the body, something that enters the body and then leaves the body, right? It's there's some good solid logic there, right? Why not admit it? Huh? It doesn't necessarily prove. Then there's other kind of proofs that are there, other kind of studies that are done. Past life memories. Anybody into that? Studied that up a bit? What is it? Dr. Ian Stevenson did all kinds of experiments where people, young people, children, they had memories of previous lives. Okay, well maybe that's just a story. Yeah, but then they started giving all kind of details that you could investigate, and it all held up. And this happened not once, not twice, many, many, many times. How do you explain this? Right? Well, the yogis say, "Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense," and the skeptics, they can't really explain it. Okay, but setting all that aside, let's just go into this and let's just try to understand that we have two forms of energy. One the yogis call prakriti or material energy, and one they call purusha or spiritual energy. Or purusha means person, right? Person, conscious. Here are the two fundamental differences between these two energies. When we're talking about material energy, it's temporary, meaning that its forms are changing constantly, changing forms and qualities, right? The material energy takes on one shape, like for instance, this microphone and this microphone stand. It appears to my eye to be made of metal, I guess steel probably, and plastic, right? So the steel, from what I understand, is like, it's taken out of the rocks, right? Taken out of the ore, the iron ore. Within the stones, within the earth, there's this element, and they have their way of extracting that element, melting it down, and then they can reshape it, right? And the plastic, from what I understand, it's derived from the oil within the earth. They pull that oil up and they refine it in different ways, and somehow, I don't know exactly how, they create plastic. Maybe there's other ingredients involved in there. I don't know so much about it. Maybe you know more than I do. But the point is, it was in another form before. It was in a rock. Then it became in this form. It may get recycled at some point, and then it'll take on a new shape, right? If you look at all the ingredients in our body, right? What is in the body? There's earthy stuff, like the bones, right? There's watery stuff, like the blood and the sweat and so many liquids in the body. Earth, water, there's fire in the body. How do you think you digest food? There's heat in there, right? How do they take your temp? They take your temperature, and the body is, well, in Fahrenheit 98.6, in Celsius it's 36 point something, 36.8. Okay, so there's heat in there, right? There's fire in the body, keeping it warm, right? Earth, water, fire, air. Obviously, there's air within the lungs and so on. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then the subtle ingredients: mind, intelligence, and ego. These are the forms that we are existing in. And just right now, close your eyes for a moment. Okay. And now, notice under your tongue, what's under there? Some water, right? Yes? You're feeling that? Is it building up? Okay. You can swallow now. So that water, where did it come from? Right? Well, we were probably drinking some water yesterday or this morning, and somehow I don't know exactly how long it takes to go through the whole system and manifest as the moisture in the mouth. But we took it in. Maybe we took it in through our food. Maybe we ate some watermelon, right? Well, where did the water in the watermelon come from? Well, it came from the earth, right? It's got these roots, and it's pulling the water out of the earth. Well, where does the water in the earth come from? Well, it comes from the rain, right? The clouds have it. The clouds rain it down on the earth. Well, where does the water in the cloud come from? It comes from the ocean, right? There's a big, huge body of water, the ocean. It's a massive resource. It's a massive reservoir of water that we use. We're fortunate that the ocean is preserved, right? Because sometimes you see bodies of water that are like kind of stagnant, and all kinds of like gross stuff starts to grow in it. You know what I'm saying? There's all kind of algae, and that doesn't happen in the ocean because the ocean has this preservative in it. What's that preservative? Salt, right? Perfect arrangement, is it not? But the problem with the salt is that then the water's no good for like watering crops and doing things like that. True? But again, perfect arrangement by nature. The sun, right? The sun evaporates that water and distills it into pure water and then holds it up in the air. Right? And water weighs a lot, doesn't it? 1 gallon of water, it's like hard to carry that thing around for too long. You go up in that cloud, there's like tons and tons and tons of water inside it. It's like it's inconceivable how much water is inside that cloud. And yet it's just floating. Just floating in the air. The wind blows it. The wind is also, I can't explain this. Other weathermen or something could explain it, but it's the sun that also causes the wind. True? You've studied this before? The sun causes the wind. The wind blows that cloud. It's so heavy, but the wind is so strong. It blows the cloud over the earth, and at a certain point, it lets go of all that water, pure water now, distilled water, goes down into the earth, right? And it gets filtered as it's going through the earth, and it absorbs nutrients. It absorbs flavors and aromas. And when that watermelon pulls it in, there's a little life in that seed of the watermelon. There's a spark of spirit in it, right? So therefore, it has the power to pull that water in, right? And then it has its own genetic coding that uses that water in its own particular way. It takes on its own special form, its own special flavor, its own special nutrients, right? So you have a watermelon seed here, and it's sucking up water. And you also have a bitter melon seed over right next to it. And it's pulling in the same water, but it manifests in a very different way. True? One is very bitter, one is very sweet. And different nutrients does different things for the body, right? Watermelon is very refreshing, very, very sweet. Bitter melon, you have to develop a taste for it for a lot of people, right? But it's actually very healthy. I think it's for the liver, if I'm not mistaken, very good for the liver and in other ways. Very healthy food, right? It's got its own special genetic code, and it's transforming that water into a different form, right? Then we eat the watermelon, and all that water goes within us, carrying special flavor. And as soon as that flavor hits the tongue, well, then the body begins to release certain particular enzymes designed just to digest that particular food, right? Then the body breaks it down, and then the heat within the body is like a little furnace in there. There's fire in there that's going to burn it up, digest it, right? The fire of digestion. And then all the nutrients are spread throughout the blood of the body, and it's carried all around, and all the tissues are nourished in this way, right? And some of that water comes up in your mouth, and is that water that's underneath your tongue right now. And then it'll be released from the body in one form or the other, maybe through sweat, and maybe through urine, maybe through spitting. I don't know, somehow it's going to come out. And then it'll take on another form, right? And the earth within our body, when we die, it's going to enter into the earth, and it'll take on other forms. It may become a watermelon, for all we know, or a bitter melon. And the water in our body will take on another form. The air within the body will mix with all of the rest of the air. That's the nature of Prakriti. The energy itself is eternal, but the forms that it takes are temporary. So Prakriti is temporary in that sense. It's constantly shifting form. Whereas Purusha, it's eternal, unchanging forms and qualities. Again, Krishna is going to say in the Bhagavad Gita, you take the soul, you can't cut it in half, you can't burn it, you can't distort it in any way. It's a different type of energy, right? And Prakriti is insentient. It has no feelings. It has no awareness, you know. If you take this stage right here, it's made up of Prakriti. You could pound on this all day. There's nobody there complaining because it has no feelings. It's insentient. Whereas if you tap on my head all day, I'm going to complain. Maybe I'll like it. They do massage like that in India too, right? But not too much of it. Because there's some feeler inside. That's the soul, right? It feels. These are the distinctions between Prakriti and Purusha. It's clear? It's simple. But this idea that there is this energy that's sentient, that's conscious, and that never changes, means it can't die. So when the body dies, it moves on. This is essential, right? This is essential for understanding life. This is what the yogis are teaching us. And so we were speaking yesterday. We can all assume, we can take it for granted that I've been man, I've been woman, I've been black, I've been white, I've been Indian, I've been American, I've been human. Okay, so far maybe, right? I've been animal. What? Is that possible that we've been in other bodies? In other words, someone may say, okay, what you've been speaking, there's a certain logic to it. That there's this element that we can't see that gives life to the body, and and it's that element that's perceiving and feeling within the body. That's the real us, and that we change bodies the way that we change clothes. When the old clothes get old, we take them off, we put on new ones, and we do the same thing with the bodies. Can't prove that it's untrue. There's a certain logic to it. It seems acceptable. I'm willing to consider that as a strong possibility. But now you're telling me that not only do we change bodies, but we even change species? This is a little hard to accept. Well, why? Why on earth? What's your reasoning? Give me some good, strong, logical reason why that's not possible, right? And I don't think you'll find a satisfying answer, right? It's not that the yogis are saying it's not that there's a human soul and an animal soul, a dog soul, a cat soul, a mouse soul, a tree soul, a blade of grass soul. They're saying that the soul in all of them is the same. It's just the body that's different. Okay, think about this. Consider this. If you were to ask me, Kastuba, how fast are you? How fast can you travel? And I'll say, sit back and watch. And I would, on that day, I was fortunate that my friend lent me his Porsche. I don't know the numbers that come out. A lot of people know the Porsche 658V or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what they are, but let's say I had the latest model, and I got in there and at 200 miles an hour, I zipped past you, and you were like, "Whoa!" I had no idea because Tuba is very fast, right? But then the next day, they brought someone along to just show just how fast I was. Kastuba, can you drive past this guy? I want to see how fast you are again. But I didn't have that Porsche. I just had my own economy car, right? Slow car, even an old one, beaten up one, you know. This car only goes like 45 miles an hour. It's a real junker, we call them. And so I drive past that, and they say, I guess Kastuba isn't so fast after all, right? He's actually rather slow, right? But the fact is, it's not me that was fast or slow. It was just the vehicle that I was in that was either expanding my speed or contracting my speed, facilitating greater speed or reducing that speed. I was the same. It was just the body that I was in that was either limiting or expanding my potential. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes? Everybody with me?
Yes.
Okay. So the yogis are saying that's what it's like these bodies are like, right? You look at a tree, can it express its feelings to us? Can it even feel the things that we feel? It's certainly feeling something, right? We can see it reach for the sun. We can see it grow around other trees. We even know that underneath their root systems, they reach out to each other, they touch each other, they support each other, they communicate with each other. This thing we know. They can examine this. They can do experiments and see how it reacts, how it expresses its own pain and so on, right? But can it communicate on the level that a human being communicates, or even a dog communicates? How many dog owners do we have here? Raise your hand. Okay. Do you know when your dog is happy? You can tell? Can it express that to you? How do you know? The wagging the tail is a dead giveaway, right? And in other ways, you could feel it. True? Can you tell when your dog is afraid? They can say that's right. I've heard this. I've never seen it myself, but I've heard that like when you take out your suitcase and open it up, the dog immediately knows what's going on, right? Oh no, they're going to go away again. And they start to express, they whimper and do the different things expressing their fear that you're leaving them again, so they can communicate. I once saw a video, someone had like the cameras in their apartment, and they showed the moment that they left the door to go to work, the dog is just like, don't go, don't go, don't go. And then it just sat there by the door, just hoping that the person was going to come back. And it eventually realized, oh, they're gone for a long time again. And then it went over to the bed and just got in the person's bed, where they could sniff in their, just reminding them of their owner. And then as soon as the owner, they heard the owner's at the door, they just, with full excitement, run to the door, right? It's so excited that they're back, jumping up in the air, tail wagging, and so on. They're feeling, right? They're actually feeling love, right? So, so a dog can express itself more than a cockroach can, and more than a blade of grass can, but a human still more, right? What we can do, what we have potential for, what we can understand, what we can express, the sensitivity that we can express. It's more in the human body. This is why the yogis are vegetarians, because our bodies subsist on something that was alive at one point or another, whether it's a living animal or a plant. One way or another, we're surviving off something that has died. But we can choose to minimize the suffering. There's a big difference between slitting a cow's throat and pulling a carrot out of the ground, right? What it experiences. So the yogis are always trying to move through this world with compassion, always trying to move through this world with kindness. I'll say there are many qualities to the yogi, but you could categorize all those qualities into two. And those two would be kindness and simplicity. Kindness and simplicity. They generally will fall under one of these two categories. Both really important. If we're going to have the kind of mind that can go deep within the self, that can experience its own nature, then kindness is going to help facilitate that, and simplicity is going to help facilitate that. You find a lot about this across the Bhagavad Gita. That makes sense? Okay, so the yogis are saying we've been in many different types of bodies. We transmigrate. At the time of death, our consciousness and our karma determines the next body that we take, right? And then we move on, right? But the nature of the self is always Sat, Chit, and Ananda, is always eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. And the only reason that we're not experiencing it is because this mind is standing in the way, right? So soon we'll be getting to the mind. Any questions about what we've talked about so far, about the nature of the self? I'm wide open for questions here. I'm encouraging questions. Yes, Celeste.
I have a question, Prabhu. You just mentioned before when you were talking about the different species and that we all have the same soul, eternal soul.
Yes.
Is there also different, I guess, attributes to the soul, like in terms of us being individuals as well as the same?
Does the soul have its own nature, like its own individual nature?
That's right. Is my soul different to yours, but it's also the same?
So in Vedanta, there are two schools of thought on this. I'm firmly in one camp, and I have my reasons for that. But I'll describe them both. One school of thought we call Advaita Vedanta. And what they both are reading the same texts, but both are understanding them differently, right? And so you get different explanations. The Advaita Vedantins are saying that the body that we're in right now is an illusion. That it's a imposition placed on top of truth, right? There's a famous analogy that's used, and that's the analogy of the snake and the rope. How many of you have heard the analogy of the snake and the rope? Okay. The idea is this. It's relatively simple. That it's nighttime. You walk and open up your front door of your home, maybe to step out and get something or go out for a moment. And you open up the door and in the darkness, you see a snake. You quickly close the door. You feel fear, and then you close the door, right? Then the next morning, when the light is out, you open up the door and you say, oh, it wasn't a snake, it was a rope, right? There was nothing to be fearful about all along, okay? So the idea is that it was only a rope, but you impose the idea of the snake onto the rope, right? Once the light came up, it lit up everything, and you could see it in its truth. Then you understood it's not a snake. I was just imposing that. I'm free of my fear. So the Advaita Vedantins are saying that we're imposing the idea of our own individuality on top of truth. And when everything's lit up with the light of knowledge, we realize that this body is an illusion and our own individuality is an illusion. And in the end, there's only one. There's not me and there's you. There's only Brahman that has no attributes. It's attributeless, right? And then you feel that nature of Brahman and you exist in a state of eternal peace, like that. That's there. Now, what the Bhakti Vedantins say, this is the other school, they say there's a flaw in this, in your interpretation of this analogy. It's a great analogy. It's really helpful. But the fact is, for you to impose the idea of a snake onto a rope, something's necessary, right? Something that didn't fit into your analogy. Can anyone guess what that is? There has to be a real snake. You have had to experience an actual snake to impose that idea onto a rope, right? Also, you could say that the rope has to have similar attributes to the snake, right? Why do you confuse a rope for a snake but not, say, the mailbox, right? Because it shares attributes with the snake, that it's coiled up or long and skinny, right? Whereas the Advaita Vedantins are saying that Brahman has no attributes, right? Well, then why are you confusing Brahman with an individual that has attributes? They're so far different. And you must have, in truth, experienced the form of an individual being in order to impose it on anything else. So it doesn't really hold up very well. So what the Bhakti Vedantins are saying is there is some imposition going on, right? There is some illusion going on here. But it's that in the spiritual truth is that we do have individual existence, right? But we confuse our spiritual identity with material form, with this body. We think I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm black, I'm white, I'm like that. You've imposed your true spiritual identity onto matter. Now understand you're not your body, you're not your mind, and then you'll experience your own eternal individual self with its own special attributes, with its own individual personality, like that. So 2 different schools of thought on that. All right? Thank you. Good question. Okay. More about the nature. I want to share one more thing about the nature of the self, and maybe tomorrow we start to get into the mind. Does that sound all right? So we said that the soul is sat, which means they're eternal, but also we could say changeless, right? Never changing. Never born, never dies, and never changes. And that the self is chit, meaning that the self is conscious, but that also indicates not just consciousness, but perceiving truth as it is, full of knowledge. You could translate it that way, that we know who we are underneath. By nature, we're not confused, but temporarily we're in a state of confusion because we're identifying with the mind. And then third, ananda means bliss, that the nature of the self is bliss. And the bhakti yogis speak about this at great length. What is the nature of that bliss, right? In its fullness, how is that bliss experienced and how is it expressed? Now, if I were to ask all of you, what is the highest bliss in life? What is the deepest happiness? What would you say? I'm sorry? What experience?
Yet to experience.
You've yet to experience it. Well, what is the happiest thing that you've experienced in this life?
Feeling balanced, not happy or sad.
Feeling balanced, really.
If you feel like that, then
Okay, you've never.
You think it's temporary? Nothing.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, what's the highest happiness you've experienced in life? Just being evenness?
Far away.
Huh?
Ecstasy
But what is the highest ecstasy that you felt?
during Kirtan.
During Kirtan? Oh, that's a good answer.
Very good.
What about love? How about love? Isn't it? Isn't that what we're searching for? Even balance, we can get really balanced, but generally we're still looking for love, is it not? If you were experiencing stress in your work life and you wanted to escape it, and you went to a place where you can just find complete peace and balance, say you went to the Bahamas and you're sitting on your beach chair out there, all secluded, nothing to bother you out there, just you could find your balance. Oh, so nice, right? Sun is shining, you're just hearing this gentle roar of the waves, just creating still more peace. You're like, oh yeah, it's so nice, such a relief. But how long will you sit there alone? At a certain point, what are you going to start to feel? Something lacking, yes? Boredom, I need to share this with someone. True? Yeah, it's that love that we're actually searching for, right? Love is that highest bliss. Now, the Advaita Vedantins will challenge that, but I don't think they have much of a leg to stand on, right? The Bhakti Yogis are saying that this Ananda, its full expression is in divine love, right? And that divine love is actually our truest nature, our complete nature. Or they would use this word, our dharma. You're all familiar with the word dharma, yes? Dharma. They say that this is really helpful. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I'll share this today. And tomorrow we'll go on to the mind. You ready to go on to the mind tomorrow?
yes.
So they say that there are two types of dharma: the eternal dharma, the dharma that never changes, and the temporary dharma, the dharma that's relative, that changes according to circumstances and changes according to time. All right? What is the eternal dharma of the self? The Bhakti Yogis say ultimately it's love expressed through devotional service, right? Ultimately it's love. That's ultimately what we're designed for, right? Just like this was designed, I guess it's designed for a lot of things. It's designed essentially for making phone calls. This is designed for amplifying sound. This is designed for processing and storing information. This is designed to help make performers more visible to an audience, right? Everything is designed with purpose, right? And that purpose is our dharma. What is the self designed for? It's designed for love. That's what it's really designed for. That's why we're all searching for it all the time. All the songs, what are they all about? All about love, finding love, experiencing love, losing love, suffering because of our lost love, right? Practically the majority of it, right? All the dramas, they all have a love theme in them. It's so central to who we are. It resonates with us because it's what we're designed for. So the Bhakti Yogis are saying we can go deep into this. As yogis, as Vedantins, we can understand this, right? And the thing about the eternal Dharma is it's shared by every living being. It's not that that's my Dharma, not your Dharma. It's everyone's Dharma, the eternal Dharma, the nature of the self, right? Pure love for God. And through loving God, love for every living being, right? And then there are the temporary Dharmas, right? Sometimes called Sanatana Dharma is the eternal one. Sometimes called Svadharma, the individual Dharma. These are relative according to time and place and circumstances. The Dharma that you have today, you might not have had yesterday. And it may change. You may take on a different Dharma in the future, right? Someone may be a parent, right? That's a Dharma, right? I used to be free to just wander around and go out at night, and I didn't have to make too much money, and I lived in a dirty little apartment, and then I had a kid. And then my Dharma changed. I had a different purpose in life. Now caring for that child became elevated in my understanding of what is my purpose in life, right? That became, and so for that time I became a parent, right? And that came with certain responsibilities, certain mindset, right? That I had to adopt, certain activities that I need to carry out as part of that Dharma, right? And then at a certain point, the children grew up and they moved on. And then I had a different Dharma, right? Dharma of a retired person, Dharma of an elder, like that. I didn't have that Dharma before. Now I have a new Dharma. My Dharma may have to do with my occupation, with my age or stage in life, how I operate within society. And these come and go and they change. And my Dharma may be different from yours. Your Dharma may be different from mine, right? These are the temporary Dharmas. But the two work together because the temporary Dharmas, the practice of them, are there to help bring out the original Dharma, right? The original Dharma. There's a and we'll come back to this at some point later in the course, but in the Srimad Bhagavatam, whereas the great sage Vyasadeva really takes pains to clarify everything that he shared before in all of his previous texts, in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, in the Mahabharata. He's really trying to say, I'm going to help you understand it all. And he does it in this beautiful, creative way. Because there's always been confusion and debate over these topics. He said, let me write one final text where I really spell it all out for everyone. That's the Srimad Bhagavatam, most fascinating, 18,000 verses. And he opens it up in such a creative way. Would you like to hear how he opened it up? He took a whole big group of sages that all had different ideas about the essence of the spiritual teachings of Vyasa's works, of the Vedic literature. And he put them all in one group out in the forest. He tells a story. And they're all trying to do something good for society because the darker age of Kali Yuga was coming. But they're all confused about what was the right thing to do. And they were experimenting and talking amongst them. They're very sincere people, very qualified people. And they're all working, but they all feel like they're not getting anywhere. They're not hitting the mark, right? They're a little confused. They have different ideas about what the essence of the sacred texts are all about, right? And so at a certain point, they kind of give up, and they say, we need another approach here. So they approach one sage amongst them all, right? And his name was Sutta Goswami. And they say, dear Sutta Goswami, we have a big group of sages here, some really qualified people. But the fact is, we all believe that you're the most qualified, right? You're the elder amongst us, but not only that, it's the way that you've lived and the way that you served. The way that you served your gurus, you became especially blessed by them, right? And by being blessed by them, you've been blessed with the understanding of the subtleties and the nuances and the essence of Vyasadeva's Vedic literature, of all the yoga literature, all of Vedanta. You understand it really clearly. Could you please, for the benefit of all of us, could you explain the essence of these texts, right? Because some of us believe that the goal of all of this is to live a dutiful life and reap good karma. Carry out your dharma, right? And receive good results for that, right? And some of us believe that the goal of all this is to let go of the things of this world, even walk away from all of these temporary dharmas. It's all temporary stuff that gives temporary results. Transcend it all, walk away from it. And some people believe that love is the highest principle, that beyond doing these duties and beyond walking away from the world, that those are ultimately selfish concerns, and there's a higher, deeper, essential matter, and that's divine love. Could you tell us, what is the essence of it all? What brings the highest good to all mankind, and what leads to the complete satisfaction of the soul? And Sutta Goswami appreciates the questions. And he says, Savai pungsa paro dharmo yato bhaktir hoksaje, ahoitiki apratiyata ya yatma suprasidati. That the highest dharma, the paro dharma, savai pungsa for all humanity, paro dharmo, the highest dharma, yato bhaktir hoksaje, is offering devotion, offering love, practicing bhakti, offering bhakti to Adhoksaja, to that supreme Lord. That offering must be unmotivated, selfless, and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. And then there's an objection. Well, what about walking away from the world? What about jnana and vairagya? What about knowledge and detachment? Because the Upanishads speak a lot about that. We thought that was the highest thing. And he says, knowledge and detachment, when you have bhakti, knowledge and detachment just come automatically with it. When you love the spirit, you easily let go of matter. You become detached from it. And then there was a further objection. Well, what about all the duties, the dharmas that are given in the Vedas that bring good results? Doesn't that lead to the highest good? And then he says this, really interesting. He says that all of the duties that we do in life, all the Vedic duties, all these dharmas, if they don't bring about some calling in the heart to hear about the beautiful, loving pastimes of the Supreme, this is what he says about all the Vedic literatures that he wrote. He says, then they're a complete waste of time. Whoa. That's a big statement, right? So the idea is that, yes, we do our duty in this world. We embrace our duties in this world, but the point of them is to help us uncover our true loving nature, that Krishna prema, that love for God and love for every living being, that we perform our temporary duties, understanding that that's not the true us, but they're there to help us cultivate a detachment from the world and an attachment for God. And through that, they can be favorable for awakening this love of God within ourselves and uncovering the true Dharma, the eternal Dharma that we all share, which is the ultimate nature of the self, pure love. So we said yoga is a practice which empowers one to overcome the obstacle of the mind for the purpose of the self experiencing its own true nature. We've spoken a bit about the true nature of the self, that it's eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss, that bliss is ultimately divine love. It's within us all. We're not experiencing it because the mind is standing in the way, because we're identifying with the mind instead of the self. So this mind is very powerful. Tomorrow we go into understanding the mind. Thank you all so very much. I enjoyed spending this time with you, and look forward to spending more time with you tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Hari Om Tat Sat.